What's up, YouTube family? Welcome back to another mind-blowing episode. If you're new, hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss what's coming. And to my loyal viewers, you already know, we're about to dive deep into something crazy today. Fire the devil in the pulpit. The generational curse of Bishop Alonzo Grant fire a story of power, greed, deception, and a battle between darkness and light that shook Jamaica to its core. In the heart of New Kingston, Jamaica, stood the Holy Fire Ministries, a grand church with thousands of followers. Leading them was Bishop Alonzo Grant, a charismatic, wealthy, and seemingly anointed man of God. To the public, he was a messenger of Christ, preaching powerful sermons, performing miracles, and living in luxury. But behind the pulpit, his life was soaked in darkness. Years ago, Alonzo had made a deal with a powerful Obeah man in the hills of St. Thomas. He drove the latest Benz, wore custom Italian suits, and lived in a mega mansion in Cherry Gardens. The people adored him. Women threw themselves at him. Businessmen lined up to pay for his blessings, and politicians sought his advice before elections. But what his followers didn't know was that their bishop wasn't serving God. He was serving the devil himself. The rise of Bishop Alonzo grew up in a small rural village, where his grandmother introduced him to the dark arts. At an early age, he learned the power of sacrifice, rituals, and deception. Before Alonzo became famous, he was a broke man struggling in the streets of Kingston. Desperate for power and wealth, he sought out a Ye. He told him that his destiny was greatness, but at a cost. He saw the desperation of people seeking hope and realized that the easiest way to control minds and money was through the church. With the help of a powerful Obeah man, Alonzo made a pact. He would sacrifice one soul every month in exchange for wealth, influence, and power. The deal worked. His sermons became hypnotic, his miracles looked real, and his congregation grew from hundreds to thousands. Every Sunday, he put on a show, but behind closed doors, his hands were drenched in blood. You want riches? Power? Thousands bowing before you? Then you must feed the spirits. You want power? You must give blood for it. The bigger the sacrifice, the bigger the reward. Alonzo, blinded by greed, agreed to the unthinkable. His first human sacrifice was his own wife, Sister Pauline, a quiet and devoted woman who had loved him despite his flaws. He drowned her in the church's baptismal pool during a midnight ritual, offering her soul in exchange for unlimited influence. From that night on, everything changed. His sermons became hypnotic, his prayers healed the sick, or so it seemed, and his church grew from a small storefront gathering to a mega ministry worth millions. But every month, the dark spirits demanded a new sacrifice. A journalist named Donovan Blake, who had been investigating Kingston's biggest scandals, got wind of the rumors and went undercover as a new member of the church. After gaining Alonzo's trust, Donovan was invited to a private prayer meeting. But instead of prayer, he witnessed something unimaginable. Deep inside the church's underground chamber, a group of masked men surrounded a young woman tied to an altar. Alonzo raised a dagger, chanting in a strange language, as the girl screamed for her life. This was the truth behind his so-called miracles, human sacrifices to maintain his power. Donovan secretly recorded everything and leaked the footage online. Jamaica went into chaos. The video spread like wildfire, causing the biggest scandal in the country's religious history. Realizing his empire was crumbling, Alonzo planned to flee Jamaica using a fake passport. He packed his millions and booked a private jet. But that night, something terrifying happened. While waiting in his mansion, he suddenly heard whispers, low, inhuman voices calling his name. Alonzo, you belong to us now. His mansion shook violently, mirrors cracked, and a shadowy figure appeared before him. It was Pauline, his murdered wife, her eyes black as night. Alonzo, you failed us. Now we take you. He screamed in terror as unseen forces dragged him into the darkness. The next morning, police found his lifeless body inside the church, twisted in an unnatural position, his face frozen in an expression of pure horror. The only clue? A single bloody handprint on his chest. But this was just the beginning. Just when people thought the nightmare was over, a new pastor took over the Holy Fire Ministries, claiming to be the true, anointed one. But weeks later, rumors began to spread. Young women were going missing again. Was Alonzo the only one? Or was he just part of something bigger? The rise of his son, worse than his father with Alonzo gone, his younger son, Ezekiel Grant, took over the church. But Ezekiel wasn't just a false prophet, he was a demon in human skin. Ezekiel was far more vicious than his father. Unlike Alonzo, who hid behind charm and deception, Ezekiel was a true monster. He didn't just sacrifice in secret, he made the church his personal kingdom of evil. Under his rule, the church became a cult. Church members were forced to take oaths of loyalty. Women who questioned him disappeared. Anyone who tried to leave was cursed. The spirits demanded more sacrifices, and Ezekiel couldn't keep up. At first, he offered blood from animals, but it wasn't enough. The spirits became angry, demanding human life. He was running out of time. Realizing that their pastor was under a dark curse, the remaining church members knew there was only one way to save him: a week-long fasting and prayer revival. The old mothers of the church, the true warriors of God, locked the doors and cried out to Jesus Christ. For 7 days, they fasted. They prayed. They rebuked the spirits that had taken over their church. Bibles were opened. Anointing oil was poured. Gospel hymns shook the walls. Ezekiel screamed and convulsed, his body breaking down as the spirits fought to hold on to him. Finally, on the 7th day, a bolt of lightning struck the church roof. A loud scream filled the air, and a dark mist rose from Ezekiel's body. The demons were cast out. Ezekiel fell to the ground, his body weak and broken, but alive. Ezekiel believed that if he sacrificed 7 innocent souls, he would become immortal and unstoppable. But he didn't realize one thing: the spirits were already angry. His father had failed them, and now the darkness was out of control. During a midnight ritual, as he raised his blade over his latest victim, something terrifying happened. The church shook violently. The walls bled. The chandeliers swung wildly. Then came the whisper: "Ezekiel, you are next." A cold wind rushed through the sanctuary, and suddenly, Bishop Alonzo's ghost appeared at the pulpit. His body was decayed, his eyes black as night, his mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. He pointed at his son and whispered, "You can't escape, Ezekiel. The deal is broken. They want you now." Suddenly, Ezekiel's body lifted into the air, twisting violently as an unseen force entered him. He screamed in terror, his skin burning from the inside out. The spirits had come for their payment. The spirits were never truly gone. After Ezekiel's exorcism, the church thought they had won. But something strange started happening. People saw shadows moving in the empty church halls. The baptismal pool would fill with blood-red water at random times. Members had nightmares of Alonzo whispering, "You failed me. Now I am coming for you." One night, a young prayer warrior, Sister Lorraine, stayed late to clean the altar. As she turned to leave, she saw something that froze her blood: the cross on the pulpit turned upside down. Then she heard it. A familiar deep voice, one she hadn't heard in years. "You think you can cast me out? Me built this church, and me will rise again." Bishop Alonzo's ghost stood before her, laughing, his eyes glowing red. She screamed, but before she could run, she felt cold fingers grip her throat. Desperate for answers, the church elders decided to dig deeper into Alonzo's past. What they found shook them to the core. Hidden in a forgotten graveyard deep in the hills of St. Thomas, they discovered a mass burial site, hundreds of unmarked graves. A local elder whispered, "This na normal burial ground." Alonzo used this place to hide him sacrifices. One grave stood out, covered in black candles and fresh goat blood. They dug it up, and inside, they found the rotting body of Sister Pauline, Alonzo's wife. But her eyes were still open, as if she had been buried alive. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the graveyard, and they heard Pauline's voice, cold and lifeless. "You should have left me in peace." The ground began to shake, and one by one, the graves opened, bodies crawling out, reaching for the elders. The dead had risen. Meanwhile, Ezekiel, now fully recovered, wasn't the same. He was silent, withdrawn, staring at the walls for hours. Then one night, he called a secret meeting with his most loyal church members. He stood before them and said, "My father made a deal with the spirits, but I have made a new deal, a greater one." He held up a crown made of bones and gold. "I will finish what he started." That's when they realized the truth: Ezekiel was never saved. The spirits never left him. They had made him their king. The final showdown. Holy war at midnight. High voltage word spread fast. Ezekiel was holding a secret midnight service. The true believers knew it wasn't a service, it was a ritual. The church elders, prayer warriors, and even other pastors from all over Jamaica came together for one final battle. At 11:59 p.m., they surrounded Holy Fire Ministries. Inside, Ezekiel stood at the altar, his followers kneeling before him, chanting in a strange language. A massive throne sat behind him, carved with demonic symbols, and in his hands, a sacrificial dagger dripping with fresh blood. As he raised the dagger, the prayer warriors burst through the doors. Fire war broke out. Fire church members started manifesting demons, climbing walls, and attacking the saints. Lightning struck the building, and the chandeliers crashed to the floor. A dark mist filled the sanctuary, twisting into the shape of Alonzo. Ezekiel, me son, finish the ritual. Me power is yours. Ezekiel, possessed, lunged at the head pastor, but before he could strike, an old woman, Mama G, the strongest prayer warrior in Jamaica, stepped forward. With one hand raised to the sky, she shouted, "Jesus Christ, show your power." A blinding light filled the room. Ezekiel screamed as his skin burned. Alonzo's spirit shrieks in agony, its form cracking apart. The ground splits open, and the spirits are dragged into the abyss. Ezekiel falls to the ground, lifeless. The battle is over, or so they thought. 1 month later, the church has been cleansed. The congregation is rebuilding. But late at night, the new pastor, Reverend Michael, receives an anonymous letter. It reads, "The bloodline has not ended. The prophecy is not yet fulfilled. The true heir of darkness is coming soon." And at the bottom of the letter, signed in blood, e.g., the initials of Ezekiel Grant. But Ezekiel was dead. Or was he? To be continued.